Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because otherwise I might just turn to glass. Today we are talking about the final book, I think, in this McLemore read-along, finally wrapping up all of their books, have a review out for all of them, catchy series title, The Mirror Season. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I bought this book myself, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions, as always, are my own. I would also highly recommend looking up the content warnings for this book. I think this is one of those instances where it is very, very important that you do, because you should go into this knowing what you're getting yourself in for. If that's the right way of phrasing that, I'm not sure. Content warnings. I will link the story graph. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as I can while still talking about the elements of the book that I do want to talk about. If you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now. This book came out in 2021, another during the pandemic book. We have reached that point in this publishing schedule. It is a contemporary YA magical realism book, I think is the best way to describe it. A lot of previous A.M. McLemore I've described as fantasy, YA, magical realism. This is much more of a contemporary. If you'd like to find out more about A.M. McLemore, you can check out all the other videos I've done on their works. There are quite a few of them up on the channel now. Just do a little cheeky search, or maybe I'll link a playlist if I've got around to making it yet. You can go and check those out. Graciela Cristales' whole world changes after she and a boy she barely knows are assaulted at the same party. She loses her gift for making enchanted pan dulce. Neighbourhood trees vanish overnight while mirrored glass appears, bringing reckless magic with it. And Ciela is haunted by what happened to her and what happened to the boy whose name she never learned. But when the boy Locke shows up at Ciela's school, he has no memory of that night, and no clue that a single piece of mirrored glass is tearing his life apart. Ciela decides to help him, which means hiding the truth about that night, because Ciela knows who assaulted her and him, and she knows that their survival depends on no one finding out what really happened. I've read that blurb to you because I think it can explain the plot better than I can. As you can tell from that blurb, this is a difficult topic to deal with. This book deals with trauma, particularly healing after the trauma of an assault, and it's really heavy stuff. It's a very difficult book. It's heavier than I was expecting it to be when I first read it, but I put off reading this for about a year. I wasn't planning on picking it up, partly because of that. I wasn't sure if it was something I was going to... I put enjoy in air quotes because I don't know if enjoy is the right word for this, but a book that I was going to maybe appreciate or get something out of. I actually think it's a really good handling of the topic for so many reasons, both because it warns you up front what you're getting in for, which is always appreciated. I don't want a hidden trauma book. And also, the actual way that the book deals with it is very open, very honest, and clearly coming from a place of personal truth, which I think helps with it not feeling sensationalized or overly fictionalized. There is a lot of fantasy within this story. We have the things turn into glass, we have magical pan dulce and so such, but the actual things that happen are grounded in reality, and the consequences of that, positive or negative, are grounded in reality as well. So if you were concerned that this book was going to do some of that sensationalizing or that it wasn't going to be a delicate handling of the topic, I think don't be concerned about that. From my perspective, I think it was a really well-handled version of the story. And equally, I think there are enough sweet portions of the book to balance it out. In some cases, very literally. There is a lot of talk about cake in this book, and if you read it and you are hungry, you will regret it because you will want all of the pan dulce immediately. I would like a recipe book based off this book, please. I am very hungry just thinking about it, and I read it months ago. But there are equally very emotionally sweet moments throughout the story. There's some really lovely community moments, some friendship moments. It's a really lovely queer story at its heart. We have a pan main character, which I really appreciated. And yeah, it's a good time. Which is bizarre because it is such a heavy topic and some elements of it are really heart-wrenching, really difficult, really presumably triggering for some people for whom that is triggering. But then you have this very sweet narrative as well, and I think that that's, again, a nice grounding of the book in reality of life comes with all of these different things. How do you put your life together when this kind of thing happens to you? I've written in my notes, the teenagers aren't super cringy, but find a better way of putting that, though. Because it is tricky reviewing YA, particularly when things lean towards more contemporary like this does, as a 20-something-year-old lady, late 20-something-year-old lady. It's hard to judge whether these teenagers feel realistic. What is a realistic teenager? What does that mean? I actually think that this manages to do it really well. I think partly because it doesn't do that thing of throwing in random social media sites that immediately feel dated and so such. I think that this actually will stand the test of time for a while, which a lot of contemporary fiction, one of the problems I have with it is it feels very dated straight away because by the time it's been written and gone through the publishing cycle, all of the trends are gone. But because this has that magical realism element to it, and I think because a lot of the prose has that A.M. McLemore element of just feeling a little bit ethereal, even though this one is more grounded in reality than a lot of their other works, it just works and it doesn't feel cringy, which, I mean, maybe I'm not the right person to say that, but it didn't feel cringy to me. And I think that's a real positive from my perspective, as if you are an adult wanting to read this book, which we're not the target audience, let's all agree, this is geared towards a younger audience, fair enough, but if you are somebody who wanted to explore this book or this topic through this version, then I think you would have a good time with it. It doesn't feel something that's totally inaccessible. It can cross the age ranges. Obviously, I've mentioned it a few times. If this book is something that's just not going to sit right with you, I know some people who just can't read books that are about this kind of thing. That's perfectly valid. I think if you're like me and you're a completionist and you want to complete all of their work, you could probably read this if you just had someone with you to maybe mark up the chapters that are going to be particularly difficult. I will say, having talked about the accessibility of it, this is more contemporary than all of the other stuff we've done so far, other than perhaps Lakelore. I think this and Lakelore are very similar in that. I would say it doesn't harm the book, but I know personally I find YA contemporary not something I'm particularly interested in, which is another reason it took me so long to actually get round to buying and reading this book. I still think that it has enough of that fantastical element to make it worth reading, in my opinion, make it something I want to read. But if you are somebody for whom YA contemporary just isn't at all your thing, again, maybe you want to skip this one. Or equally, if what you're looking for from an A.M. McLemore book is that more fantastical element, their previous works have more of that. I think in terms of their other works, the book that feels most similar to me is actually The Weight of Feathers. I would have thought it would be Lakelore, because they both have that contemporary element to it. But I think the sheer emotional charge that this book has, and all of the idea of healing through trauma and learning more about things and withholding the truth and revealing the truth, The Weight of Feathers actually is most similar, which is so interesting because there's a seven-year gap between them now, I think, 6 or 7 years. However, if you did want the more contemporary side of things, go to Lakelore. You can go either direction, their newest book or their oldest book. In terms of other recommendations, I don't have very many because, as I said in my original read-along, I don't read a lot of contemporary YA, and I think that is what's most similar to this. The one I wondered about was something like the exact opposite of OK, which deals a lot with some of the similar feelings that this book deals with in a slightly more comedic way than this book does. This is much more of a gentle exploration of trauma, whereas that book is more angry about things, but like humorous angry. If you are thinking about reading this, if you are wanting to, I would say go for it. It is a good book. It is a really, really solid book. It's purely just because it's so difficult of a topic that I don't recommend it as wholeheartedly, and it wouldn't be where I would start with A.M. McLemore if I was starting. As you'll know, I recommend starting with When the Moon Was Ours, and this is so different from some of the previous stuff. Similar themes, similar ideas, similar hallmarks of their writing, but it is very different in tone. I think if you don't get on with this, I would maybe not suggest going on to Lakelore, because there is this kind of move into that more contemporary space. I'll be really interested to see what they come up with next. That sounds so rude. Like, they're putting their heart and soul into a book, and I'm like, what are you going to come up with next, kiddo? But I'm really interested to see kind of where their writing goes, and if they keep bouncing around and going between the two, or if this is a trajectory towards contemporary. I'll be very interested. I've really loved talking about all of A.M. McLemore's works. I think they are just all so... they're not different in terms of their themes, but they're so different in setting, and they're so nice to talk about that I've had a good time filming these videos, even though it has been a little bit of a slog at times. And it's really great to conclude it here, because obviously I released my Lakelore video quite a few weeks ago now, so you can now go and watch that if you haven't already, and then you'll have watched every single video about their works. Amazing. As I say, I will endeavour to make a full playlist of all of my A.M. McLemore reviews. If you would like to check that out, I'll link that somewhere. It'll be somewhere if I remember to make it. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Please do let me know down in the comments below. Are there any contemporary books or contemporary adjacent books that you'd really recommend? I would love to hear those thoughts and feelings while you're down there commenting. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated, and it lets you know when I post new videos. But nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon, who make videos like this possible, and also get early access to videos and exclusive content. If you would like to join their number, you can check all of that out down in the description below, as well as my social media and my Discord, where we have cool chill chats about books. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Welcome back to Daily Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm trying to read a blurb.